Okay, good morning. Trevor, you're first up.
Thanks, Brad. Just up here.
Yeah, please.
All right. See some familiar faces. I've been attending those meetings virtually, so when Dan and Jennifer were on, I'll try not to cover all the same information that the Master Gardeners covered.
All right, sounds good.
It's just going to be a short update. I've been at my job for like 2.5 months, so I'm not going to pretend to know hardly anything, but I'm starting to figure it out. And just wanted to give you some updates with what I've been working on. It is, in fact, we lease from the county, so we've done some infrastructure updates, so I just want to keep you updated on that. We're also doing some new programming and things in the community, so with no further ado, I'll get into it. My name's Trevor, by the way. I'm the new executive director. My family's from Mille Lacs, but I'm from North Idaho. I was a park director in a former life, and I was a park and rec faculty, so I have a little bit different approach to running this nonprofit, though this is certainly my first time doing so. So any tips or help pointers would be greatly appreciated. I'll just go through this quickly. Shouldn't take more than 10 or 15 minutes. We did some garden renovations. We have 2 wells out there. There's always been 1 operational well. Just so you know, there is 2 wells going now. The implications for that are that we're able to expand our garden giving program to the University of Minnesota. We recently received a grant through Mid-Minnesota Credit Union to expand our orchards. All of that goes back to Crow Wing County residents. We supply food, and we've been really focusing on getting food to all corners of the county. It's easy, I think, to just focus on Brandon and Baxter because we spend so much time here, and a lot of us work here. So we're trying to do the same thing with the services we provide at the ARB, is try and stretch a little bit beyond what we're currently serving to try and serve more people. The Master Gardeners have donated like 1,500 pounds through their program. We're shooting for about 2,000 pounds. I had never seen 2,000 pounds of produce. It's wild. So that's just one of the services that we're providing to the county. And Dan and Jennifer know a lot more about that program than I do, and you've already heard about it. So we are doing a nature playscape project. We procured $10,000 through the sports boosters for the nature playscape. Our donors and our board matched $10,000. So we currently have earmarked $20,000 for that project. Coming from a parks background, I really like accessible recreation sites for the community. So instead of jumping on the first phase of that, which would be installing the features, I think it's important, and the board thinks it's important, that we at least look at accessibility. The estimate was about $36,000 to get from the front building back behind G101 to the site where the playscape will be installed. So instead of that being a $20,000 project, we're looking at about $56,000 for that project. I reached out to the Burnix family. We're talking with Anderson Brothers, Cub Foods. So we're reaching out for some community partnerships to see if we can make an ADA playground accessible. So, haunted trails around the corner. I'm sure you folks are all familiar with that. Prairie restorations through the Soil and Water Conservation District. We received $40,000 for the prairie restoration project. We're only in the first year of that project. It'll be about 3 years before it's pretty. So essentially that prairie grass takes a few years to set in, and so we won't expect it to look pretty for the next year or 2, but just know that we are working on pollinators and things to help support conservation in the region. We did a community needs survey. Given my background in academia, I thought it was important to ask the community what they want from the Arboretum. I looked through as many years of documents as I could find, and I can't see that anybody has ever asked the community, what can we do to better serve you? So we put this community needs assessment together as a board. And with the hopes of getting about 1,000 signatures over 3 months and some demographic information as well. We've received about 455, I think, as of this morning. It varies. One of the questions on there was, if we had unlimited resources and money were not an issue, what would you like to see at the Arboretum? So now we have to go through and cross-tabulate all that information. Once we do, I'll have a report for you, and I'll probably just email that over. I think it's beneficial for everybody in the county to have access to the document, but I'll pull the demographic information from it because we collected some user information for a giveaway. Okay. Everyone's invited to our annual meeting. It's Monday the 2nd, 5:30 at the Arboretum. If you'd like to attend, we have our board meeting, and then directly afterward, we'll do food and beverages, things like that. And I think the last couple things on my list, I've met with Tim Huell, Minnesota Greater Trails Legacy Funding, the Nature Conservancy, and Crow Wing County. It seems like the biggest issue at the ARB in the last 49 years, it's a land ownership issue. The land is owned across three parties, one being the Arboretum, one being Nature Conservancy, and one being Crow Wing County. The deeper implications for that is that we don't rank very high on regional designation because we're considered a small park because we are three different parcels. If we were able to solve that issue, it would be much easier to go to Minnesota Greater Parks and Trails, seek designation, then we'd be eligible for state funding. So I just want everybody to know that I'm working with the Nature Conservancy in the county and everyone to try and identify ways to make that a feasible transition. I don't know what that looks like, land swap or acquisition. It could be a variety of different things. I just want everybody in the loop as I have those meetings and we move forward on those. The last thing that's relevant to the county is there's Blade opioid funds available for the county. There's a lot of different ways that funding is being allocated, but I think the importance to the Arboretum is that we have a unique opportunity to get people with substance use disorders and at-risk families access to nature and recreation. And so we're working with them and the Five Wings Arts Council and other nonprofits in the area to try and get as many people out in nature as we can. I did that as fast as I could. It was under 15 minutes, right? All right.
Does anyone have any questions for Trevor?
I do. Madam Chair, Trevor, how many acres, I'm kind of new on the board, so how many acres are there in the whole ARB?
There's 413 total acres.
Okay, how's that split up by what jurisdictions? You said the county has some?
Yeah, so well, just for ease of math, we'll say it's like 160, 160, 160.
Okay.
So the county has different land management practices than the Nature Conservancy. The Nature Conservancy is in the middle of our land, so if we're down here at the bottom on the county land that we lease on that 100-year lease, the Nature Conservancy is in the middle, and then the Arboretum's property is in the back. They have pretty strict rules for what you can do on Nature Conservancy trails, just given the nature of their organization and that Jack Pine Savanna that's back there. So it's difficult for us to get users to the back portion under those land management practices. So we essentially have 160 acres in the back that are only really accessible to trail runners and cross-country skiers. So one of the things that's coming up in the survey is accessibility, and it's coming up time and time again. A lot of people, are only able to utilize that front acreage. So we focus our efforts on developing that area. It would be very nice if we could utilize more of our property, whether that was through a deed restriction in a land use agreement or an MOU where we assume some of the TNC's responsibilities for land managing that Jack Pine Savanna. Maybe it's something with armoring trails so we can get mobility scooters back there. I don't have a good answer yet.
And you're new at it, right? You've only been there a few months?
Yeah,
Okay. Yeah,
about
thank you.
75 days.
Yeah, thank you, Trevor.
Anyone else? Well, thank you for coming.
Hey, thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Welcome to Crow Wing County.
Thank you. It's been a good run so far.
Good morning.
Good morning. Gary was supposed to be with me this morning, but he woke up feeling a little under the weather, so he went to the bullpen and asked me to come up and visit with you guys this morning. So got a couple items to discuss. One is just an update on how we're doing so far this year with the short-term rental ordinance. And you have that in front of you. It's this report there. We'll go over that, and then we're also going to discuss the harvest plan numbers for 2024. And then if we have time, I'd like to see if we have time just to talk about a quick easement, to see if I could get your opinion on direction on where we should go with a potential easement. So So the first thing I want to do is just go over the short-term rental ordinance. And so it's been a busy year. It's been, we've had a good year with it. With our software that we use, we've identified about 1,600 different advertisements on the web that let us know, who's advertising for short-term rental. We have about 705 of those advertisements are active license accounts, and then we have 92 of those are outside of our jurisdiction. So we have agreements with Crosby and with Nisswa and trying to think, Ironton, I believe we have an agreement with. So those are the cities that we work with. The other cities outside of that, like a Breezy Point, Brainerd Baxter, they have their own rules and requirements for that. So for the year, we've issued 556 licenses so far. Of those 556, 223 have been with our contract cities. 333 of those would be within our zoning jurisdictions within the townships. Then that would not include Irondale. Thank you. Irondale or Crowing Township. But we do help Crowing Township with their licenses, but they still do their own zoning. So if you look at some of these numbers, you'll see some of the numbers like the 444, the difference between that and as far as the non-regulated or the county-wide, some of that is in the attorney's office for review because we have some folks that are non-compliant with the ordinance. We have some advertisers that they aren't listed, but they still have come to get a license from us. And then there are some spots where we have 2 rentals on 1 parcel. So it's the numbers aren't always like an apple-to-apple, 1-to-1 comparison. But at this point right now, we're sitting with 24 of these enforcement cases right now. They're either in the county attorney's office or in the city's attorney going through their process to gain compliance. And so if you look at the second down there where it says number of licenses by commissioner district, Commissioner Coring, you have 74 in your district. Commissioner Lubke, you have 255. Steve, you have the big fat 0 in yours. Commissioner Franzine, you've got 91, and Commissioner Hogan's got 136. And so then if you look at the number of non-licenses that are sent to the county attorney's office, again, the largest number is in Commissioner Lubke's district with 18 total. We've got a couple in Commissioner Franzine's district and 4 of those in Commissioner Hogan. So I think that's really worked well. We get to that point of where folks are non-compliant with the ordinance, and basically the non-compliance that we're seeing with the county attorney's office is really just not getting the license, where we sent them the letters and they just don't follow through and get the license. And so that's the majority of what you see when you have those go to the county attorney's office or to the city attorney. We do get complaints. Anytime you have an ordinance, you're going to have some complaints. Considering the number of licenses, the number of advertisements, we have a total so far of 47 total complaints this year, which I think is not many. I think it's pretty minimal considering the amount of renting that's going on out there. So some of the complaints we get just aren't regulated by the ordinance. There's certain things we don't regulate. If somebody's got lights on the side of the garage and it flashes into your yard, or we have some people that will complain about stuff that the ordinance doesn't regulate. And so that would mean we have 34 that are regulated by the ordinance and 42 total properties. All the complaints have been resolved, and so we don't have any open complaints based on that. And so a lot of the complaints that we see are based on trespassing, animals, easements, and then, those are some of the things that we get that there's not much we do with. We don't deal with trespassing or, if they have like a barking dog. Those are non-regulated activities. The ones that we do deal with are illegal rentals, where people are renting for more than what was approved. The one that we see is noise. We had 8 of those. Occupancy numbers, more than what they're supposed to rent for, some parking and some garbage. And so, the illegal rental number with 13, that's just the folks who are renting without having a license in place. And so the complaints really have not been really significant, but the ones that we do get take time. And there is time and effort to follow up and get these issues resolved, and to, especially when we put together the packets for the county attorney or for the city attorney, there's a packet of information that goes with that. And so those I think, the licensing isn't probably the part that takes the most time. It's more of just, it's the complaints and following up with that and following up with the folks who, haven't got a license yet, or the ones who we've worked with them on a saying that they advertise for more than what they're allowed to actually have in the dwelling, and then having to follow back up again a couple weeks later to see, did they actually change the ad online, or have they changed it again, back to what it was before? So there's just a lot of those checks that we do to verify that people are still advertising for what they're approved for, and that. So just a lot of follow-up to make sure that we get compliance with the ordinance. We have had some appeals this year. We've had a total of 6. Every one of those appeals has been for a holding tank to be allowed, instead of having a drain field, and all 6 of those appeals have been approved, and the reason being, there's no room on the property for a drain field. And so the ones that have, and we'll talk about that a little more with some policy, maybe some changes to the ordinance regarding holding tanks, but the holding tank appeals that have been approved basically are saying you have to have an alarm for the holding tank, so when it gets to a certain, it doesn't get too full, and then it has to have an electronic buzzer inside the unit so that the people that are aware of it, that if it does get full and then there's a number to call, we want to have them, you can also get a mobile app on your phone set up, so if the buzzer does go off, you get, the owner gets a notice on their phone. We want pump out records to show that they've had the tanks pumped out regularly and have a contract for that. And so that's been pretty consistently happening through the appeal process. So considering, I think this year was a little bit different than I think maybe in previous years because of the lateness of Cross Lake coming into the program, back end of April into May. And so that was kind of a convergence of busy permit time and then trying to get these, because most of those contracted active licenses, the majority of those are up in Cross Lake. And so we had a real busy time this spring of trying to get all those things accomplished, but we got it done, and I think it's been a good year. I think we've had some complaints, but pretty minimal compared to the amount of rentals that I think that are happening across the county. So I think the ordinance is doing what it's supposed to do, and I think it's helping us to balance the property owners on both sides of the fence, who has the rental and who gets to live next to that rental.
Madam Chair, and Chris, just more of a comment and then kind of a small question. I get, to me, I've never been supportive of this, and it kind of proves what I said before when Rosemary and I were never in favor of this, and that we went for years and years and years and never had anything because there was hardly any complaints. And if you look at this, it's very, very minimal. And so I just don't see that there's a problem, but I guess here we have it. I still don't support it. But the question I have is, under resorts, you've got a number of 46. Does that mean 46 resorts? Is that
No.
what does that mean?
What that means is that resorts will also advertise on the web through these Airbnb, and that's what that means, that they were part of that number you saw, that 1597, 46 of those were resorts that were advertising that they don't get a license from us.
So when the software identifies that, and then you reach out to them and you find out that, that's a resort, then they're exempt from it?
Correct.
Oh,
Yep.
okay.
Yep. Any resort they don't get a second license from us if they've already got they're already a resort. Yep.
And what would a resort be? How many units, or how do you classify that? I mean,
Well, if you look at it from a Department of Health standpoint, anytime you rent more than 3 or more bedrooms, units, then you get a license to operate from the Department of Health for a resort. And then for us, it's either those resorts that have been here, for quite a while.
Right.
Or they would come get a conditional use permit to if they want to operate a new resort, they come get a conditional use permit from the county to do that. But most of the resorts we have in the county have been around for, prior to there was zoning in place. So they're those, uses that have been there and continue to allow those uses to keep going.
and then I'm sure you're going to go through this, but what's all the yellow stuff in there? Is that some changes?
Potential changes that Gary and I have talked about that we think might make sense for 2024.
Okay. And the underlined, it's kind of like the legislature does, the underlined is new language.
Correct. And I struck out, and I deleted when I put that together, I underlined what would be new, and I strike through what would be deleted, and I
Okay.
just tried to highlight in yellow, so it'd be just easier to find and stuff in the paper.
Are you going to run through this?
Yeah.
Okay.
Any questions about the numbers and the update?
I'm kind of amazed that there isn't as more complaints because, you know, in my district, in the district I serve, you know, there's 255 and I do get some calls. But some of them are calls, I said, well, you know, look it up. If it's a legit complaint, file the complaint.
Right.
You know, but sometimes it's just that they're just, whatever it is, they're just nuisance by somebody putting their garbage can on the right, on their, what they think is their side of the right of way versus the other. And, you know, I went down there and looked at it because they're all close by me. And it's like, yeah, there's a garbage can there. It's, the garbage is in the garbage can and it's where, you know, and I'm going like, I don't see this as an issue, but but it gives them one place to go to. The other thing is if we didn't do this, you know, we don't know what's going on. Right now, by doing it, what has it been, like 3 years now or something like, is it 4 years?
I think this is our third year.
Third year. You know, it isn't as blown up as you'd see, you know, like up in my area where you got Breezy and some of those areas where people, and they just come and they do this and they do that. Well, we have a way of guiding that and keeping our waters protected. And I think it first came in because of the health, because of the sanitary, or, you know, the on-site system, the 70s, 80s, where people are overloading them. It doesn't look like that is as big of an issue, except as far as the, you know, noise and maybe the legal rental, just people not doing it.
Yeah.
And if we make it harder, then it's going to be, you know, maybe more people are doing illegal. I think this is a clean system. And how many people are you looking at next year not allowing them to relicense? How many people have had their 3 marks?
Zero.
Zero. So they have complied when it's been brought up to them. They've had change of behavior, change how they're doing
Yep,
it.
so those ones that are in the county attorney's office are basically for just failure to get a license.
And I know Cross Lake was one that they went through it and they pushed it out pretty long before they finally decided we can't get everything they want in theirs. And I think they went with our county one. I think they're still trying to ramp up like Breezy does. They want to kind of do their own.
Right.
But then they can take care of the whole thing too. They can take care of the enforcement.
Absolutely.
They can take care of all
Yep.
that stuff if that's
Yep.
what they want to do.
Yep,
So-
absolutely.
And I think that's making them think a little bit of what that really entails.
Yep.
What service we're providing them.
Absolutely, I know, totally agree.
Okay, thank you. That's all I had.
Just another comment that you kind of struck for me is, I just point out the fact too that there's a lot of people that, you know, I'm fortunate to live on a lake. I don't know, you don't live
Nope.
on a lake. Doug's lives on a lake. I'm fortunate to live on a lake. Not everybody can afford to live on a lake. And sometimes these Airbnbs or VRVO or whatever they are, that gives a family an opportunity to come and be on a lake for a week. They don't want to go to the resort. They want to be there with their family, be able to cook meals. This gives them the opportunity. So this isn't a bad thing. And another thing is, as we see property taxes go higher and higher and higher, and somebody's paying $10,000, $12,000, $15,000 a year for property taxes, this is a way that they, and you take the insurance, this is a way that they could kind of hang on to a property that's probably been in their family for generations and generations. You know, if they live on the Whitefish chain, I mean, that's some pretty expensive property, and they probably had it for 3 generations, and then, you know, I think government trying to squeeze people out of being able to do this, and I don't agree with that. This is the only way they can, sometimes the only way they can hang on to their property, and so, you know, I'm going to continue to fight for people's property rights and to be able to do within reason on their own property, you know, to be able to hang on to their property, I guess.
Well, I think also by having this in place, when you talk about property rights, yes, it is their property, do as they choose to do with, but they also have to be respectful of their neighbor's property to you know, to just say, hey, it's my property, I'll do whatever I want here. This keeps them in that path, in that lane. And if they don't, we pull their license. And they don't have that privilege, so.
I can jump into the policy update?
Yep.
Okay. So some of this is just more housekeeping and just cleaning up a few parts of the ordinance. So the first section under definitions and general provisions, we just want to make sure that we reference the state rule 7080 for septic systems, but we also want to reference the county ordinance, which would be Article 37. So that's just more housekeeping related to that. The second item down would be the annual license required. We want to delete 3.2 because right now the ordinance requires that if you've got cabin A and B on one parcel, you have to get 2 separate licenses for each cabin. So you're limited to two rentals per property, but we're saying let's just be easier from an administrative on our part to do one license for 2 buildings on a property versus 2 licenses for 2 buildings on 1 property. So it's just gonna streamline that process. So what that'll do is next year, when you see the number of, we see 556 this year, you might see that number, if this gets approved, you might see that number go down, but it's probably not gonna be a real decrease in the units, it's just gonna be a decreased number of licenses that we would approve. We have quite a few properties where there's 2, you have a house and a cabin on there that they're renting both. It'll just streamline the process for us and for our customers to not have to get 2 separate licenses and try to maintain 2 different licenses. And then jumping down to the application requirements, this is a little bit more of a substantive policy discussion, I think, to be had. One is that, no license will be issued if the property has 3 substantiated violations within the prior calendar year prior to application for a license. And so the way the current ordinance reads is that if you had like in 2023, you had 3 and you lost your license, that you could apply on January 1 and start over again. And what this is saying is that if if within that prior calendar year that you had those 3 violations, you wouldn't be able to apply for a license then, because otherwise you can have your 3 violations, and then right away the next year you can still keep applying for your license. And so we want to hold people accountable better to that, to maintain that if you have those within the calendar year, that would prohibit then that license from the following year.
So you have 2 in August, 2 violations, substantiated violations.
Correct.
And then you can renew for your license.
Yep.
Then in April, you get another violation. Does that clock starts new again for that year?
I think what we're looking at is more along for the time frame that you have your license. And so
Right.
we're not going to be able to go from like 2 for this license and then 1 in 24. It's more of a look back to say if you had 3, let's say you had 3
Right.
violations and it was in July of 2023, you're going to have to wait till July of 2024 then to apply you'd have to wait 1 calendar year to apply for your license before you could get another one.
So quick question, Madam Chair. We talk about 1 license for 2 properties or 2 units.
Yep.
And so 1 unit has a bachelor party and night 1, they have a complaint, night 2, legitimate complaint, night 3 gigs right there.
Yep.
Can't get a license the next year. Eliminates both units from operating in the following year.
It would. Yep, it would.
I don't know, that might be a little harsh to me.
That's a little harsh, I think.
puts
Just a thought there.
Yeah, it's.
Responsibility on that landowner to do his
Right.
due diligence.
Right. And so that could be a potential reason to not separate them and to have individual licenses per parcel, per unit on that parcel. But I think also that if you're having if you're having that substantial issue in that 1 unit, it would probably be rented by the, if it's something of that grand, of that big of a situation, they're probably using both, to be honest. But I think that's definitely a discussion to be had is how do we want to handle these violations? Because I think right now, I think I wasn't here for the first couple years of it, and I think we were pretty, really working, and giving people lots of time to try to get into compliance and stuff. And that time frame is being compressed more and more now because people have had their licenses, they know what the rules are, but we still struggle with some people to follow those rules. And all that we're trying to do is to maybe make sure people know that there's a pretty, if you're not going to follow the ordinance, that there's going to be a substantial, penalty, that if you choose to not follow the ordinance, then, there will be penalties for doing that.
Madam Chair, and I think that's what would happen with those properties. They're going to be more diligent in making sure that their renters are
Right.
complying with the rules.
Right.
So,
Right.
and I don't disagree with the 1 license for 2 units on a property. I think that's a good idea, but
Yeah, we can definitely talk about
There are
what
gonna be some
how we handle the
issues.
enforcement side of it. We can definitely,
Yep.
just because if we have 1 license, I think we're still able to parse out that, what, we would possibly revoke the license for the 1 unit and then maintain the license, for the other unit on the, we could the 1 unit on that license and still have the other unit still be under a license, so. But I don't,
Do the rules, the customer know the rules when they fill out the license? Is that
Yep.
how they're informed?
yep, we're very clear about what the expectations are, yep. If we go down to the next section here under 4.2, no, again, just want to point out, this is more of just 4.2A is again more administrative. We just want to make sure that once the application is received, and then we've referred to a permit as just a license. And so it's just more housekeeping there. We just want to, and that completed should be underlined. I struck that out by accident. That should be underlined. So once the completed application is received, and then it's a license and not a permit. So just more housekeeping as we try to fine tune and look through the ordinance.
What would be the difference between a permit, the definition of permit or license? What's?
Our ordinance, so basically a permit is something is a use that's allowed in certain zoning districts, so you can do certain activities in certain areas. A license is set so you can do it anywhere in the county, provided you meet the requirements of the ordinance. So our ordinance for short-term rental issues a license, not a permit, and that's the reason, the difference between the two. A license is not subject to different zoning requirements as to where you can have the rental. That's the difference between a license and a permit.
So if I had this license and I have one on Lower South Long Lake, and then I have a property in Baxter, and I have a property in Crosby, I have a license for all of them, but then the fee depends on how many units I have, or how many
Bedrooms, number of
Pardon?
number of bedrooms. Yep, so if you have 3 different rentals, you have 3 different licenses.
Oh, I would have 3 different licenses?
Yep, each unit will get its own license, yep. Except we wouldn't license one in Baxter or Brainerd because they.
Well, I was just making that up, so,
Yeah,
I
yeah.
mean,
But let's say you had one in,
Garrison.
South Long and Garrison, and then, maybe on Roosevelt, each one has its own individual license, and each one, the fee is based on the number of bedrooms in each one of those units. And so each unit gets its own, because we want to assess the key part of our licensing is assessing the septic capacity of each of those units, and so.
and then is it capped at so many bedrooms? I mean,
No, there's no cap on
there's
bedrooms.
no cap?
No, it's capped on your septic capacity, so how much room that you have in your septic tank, that's what determines the
But then
number
what
of-
if you're in Garrison and you're on the Garrison Catheo?
Different story. If you're on the sewer in Cross Lake, or if you're on the sewer in Garrison, or the North Long sewer, then there's no septic capacity issues at that point, and so we don't, at that point, if you want to rent for 4 bedrooms, you rent for 4 bedrooms, because there's no septic capacity issues at that point.
Okay. All right.
If we go under general requirements, I think I already discussed this a little bit earlier, but this will be, another significant policy change, but, this came on recommendation from Tim Hool, that he thought that this should be a discussion point to be had. If you're seeing appeals for the same activity and it's getting to be approved, it doesn't make sense to keep that process going. And so it makes sense to have that in the ordinance with performance standards. So if you look at what we've got and what we propose in 5.1C would be, basically you'll be allowed a holding tank if it's been determined by a septic professional that there is no room to put a drain field on the property, and that the holding tanks are sized properly. There's an electronic alarm with a light and buzzer, which is installed in the rental unit, notifying occupants if the tanks are full. Written notice in the rental unit describing who to contact if the alarm is triggered, a water meter to track how much water is being used, and a contract with a state licensed septic maintainer to routinely maintain the tanks, then to submit those invoices as part of the records for your license renewal the following year.
So then the reasoning for this is so that there is an appeal after appeal after appeal going to the county administrator.
We've only had we've had a total of 6 appeals so far in '23, and everyone has been to have a holding tank allowed, so.
That's kind of, Madam Chair, the water meter, how many times you've ever been involved where you want to put a water meter on an on-site system? I understand why.
We typically would do that on more commercial type uses.
Right, yeah.
So more of our restaurants and resorts would typically have a water meter installed.
So they have an idea how much, what's going through the drain field, what's going through, and if the
Exactly. Yep.
70, 80 meets the capacity.
Right. And then if we jump down to occupancy, which would be 5.2B, what we want to do is look at defining what is not allowed to obtain additional occupancy. So right now, the ordinance talks about recreational vehicles, accessory structures and other temporary structures. What we want to basically say now is that the use of travel trailers, because we have a definition for that now, we're going to define what a travel trailer is, which includes a recreational vehicle, tents and yurts, fish houses, or other temporary structures to obtain additional occupancy. One of the things that we're going to delete off this is the accessory structure component, because, you know, there are people who have living quarters in an accessory structure that they would want to rent, and this would prohibit that from happening. So we want to clarify that the use of what we're trying to prohibit is that somebody putting, you know, 3 or 4 RVs on their property to get more space to rent on that. And so the rental is limited to the structures that are on the property and not, not other transient type uses like travel trailers and tents, yurts, that sort of thing.
What's a yurt?
Yurt are those, the tents that you
Octagonal
got.
or
The round tents that you can, it's like a tent in other words, but it's getting a lot of, it's becoming kind of the new thing out there is the
They got
use
them in
of
Crosby.
yurts. Yep.
Yep.
Yeah, yurts are kind of, they're like a tent, but it's really a cabin on the inside. I mean, they're really nice. I've actually seen some pictures of them, but just trying to make sure everybody's clear that we don't want those extra type of, on the property to gain extra capacity or to cause more people on the property than would be allowed by the septic. And then if we go down to E.
1 minute.
Yep.
Madam
I'm sorry.
Chair, if I might, in 5.2B, you are taking RVs out of there. But back up on 5.2B as in Barrows, way at the top there, the first one, you still have RVs in that statement.
Yep, so what we're, up there, we're basically saying add yurts after tents and then clarify and define recreational vehicles and RVs, and that's the add the travel trailer, because the travel trailer picks up RVs and the use of campers that are 400 square feet and no more than 8 feet in width. So a travel trailer is, in the definition of travel trailer, includes recreational vehicles. And so that's why we're getting rid of recreational vehicle and just calling it a travel trailer.
Okay, but that includes the big bus-like things that, okay.
Yep.
My fish house.
Fish houses are not allowed as additional sleeping quarters. We have a lot of nice fish houses anymore that people use in the summer.
Well,
Very,
they are a
very nice
temporary
campers in the
structure.
summer that you see those uses. So 5.2E, we're looking at, this, again, is just to clarify the idea that the said vacation rental, which was a carryover from the first ordinance version, I believe, change that to short-term rental, and then change that to units, no more than 2 units will be allowed per parcel, which would then coincide with that previous change that would that allow 1 license for 2 structures to be on 1 property. That's the definition of the travel trailer there that we would be using. And then I think another change that we've discussed would be adding a new section under number 8, and this would just clarify the relationship between counties and cities that want to have the county administer short-term rentals for them in their municipality. The biggest one is 8.1B that we would be adding, which says the city must notify the department by December 31st in writing of a city's desire for the county to administer a short-term rental on behalf of the city for the following year. And they must notify the county of every subsequent year that they want the county to administer their ordinance for them. They must then adopt the county short-term rental ordinance verbatim, and they must enter into an agreement with the county where the city agrees to be the responsible party for enforcement of the short-term rental. And so what we're basically saying is that if you want us to administer the ordinance for you, we need to know by the end of the year so we can make plans for the following year. And because the unknown of this year made things very, very challenging to try and to with Cross Lake kind of coming and going, they're in and they're out, and they're in and they're out.
Right.
And so we want to know by the end of the year if you want to be, in the.
Either you're in or you're out.
Either in or you're out, yeah.
So a question, this is 1 page, 2, 3. So the short-term rental ordinance is 3 pages. This is all the ordinance right here.
Not all of it. I just cut and pasted the sections that
Okay.
we'd be looking at.
So the definition, I was looking for the definition of short-term would be somewhere in our,
Yes, I just snipped this out so
Okay.
we didn't have to look at the whole ordinance.
short-term would be what, the 30 days or less?
Yes, yep, exactly.
So if somebody's advertising to rent their place out for a month, then that's none of our business.
None of our business.
Okay, perfect.
Madam Chair, I think you guys did a good job of updating this and clarifying some things for them, so
Thank you.
appreciate that.
The staff back in the office did a great job. I know Jessica Vuklich and Stephanie, and then some of the ESS staff were really key to putting it together. I'm just here telling you, they put it all together on paper, so they're the ones that did all the work, putting the report together, so.
I applaud you for coming with such knowledge of it on short notice.
Yeah.
Tell Gary he's got a great support in you.
Well,
I
I'm sure
see
he's probably
Tom's
watching
back-
right now, so
Tom's back
make
there
sure
to
he heard
support
that,
you
so.
too, so.
Any other questions about short-term rentals?
Yeah, Madam Chair, Chris, the cost, when we're administrating it for a city, where they said, you know, well, we want you guys to do it, do we have a cost that we charge the city? Do we pick up all the license fees then?
We just pick up the license fees.
If like in Breezy Point, they do their own, they do their own license, they do everything, they have their own
But
standards.
for example, all the units that we've licensed up in Cross Lake, we've collected all those fees.
Right.
Yeah. And so then the cost for the software we use is right around $22,000 a year. That's the 800 number that people can call if they have issues and complaints, and the software that scours the web for the rentals. And so at this point, I think based on that and the income, we're breaking even, I think, on that. So I think we're okay on the fees at this point.
Madam Chair, I worked with, I can't remember the lady in the office that does the short-term rentals, and that software you use,
Jessica.
Yeah, I wanted to try to get some information, and it looks like that software could be dialed in a little bit or updated and made it a little more user-friendly.
Well, correct. And the one that we have is not the only one available. There's other softwares out there, but they all seem to, struggle, I think, with some of the more granular, getting down to some of the details on that. One of the things that we found out as we've been doing this more and more, because it's kind of an onion, you peel back, you learn a little bit more, but part of what we're finding now is that not every rental is clear where it's located. And so the software they actually have a category that says requires more research to determine where it's located. And so we need to stay on top of those too, to make sure that we're not letting something that we don't know, because our software doesn't know where it's located, doesn't mean that we can't step in and say, we know where this one's located, and that we need to make sure we contact those folks to make sure that they're compliant by getting a license. So the software is not perfect.
No,
But it serves our purposes for what we need. It could do better reports. There's, things that we can mine data out of it better, but
Well, when I had a complaint, and somebody called me on it, and then I went to look it up and see where it's at, and it says it's down in Breezy, and it's up in Cross Lake or somewhere else, and I'm going and I tell the person, I said, well, there is none there, because I went by the software and what it was in the
Yep.
system.
And so we do have, there is that map that people can look and see where these licenses, where they're located. We've worked with the software company on making sure that map is accurate, because people rely on it to know if they're either in or out of jurisdiction for a license and where it's located.
Narcan,
Thank you.
I did. In case you have no, you would.
If there's no more questions about the short-term rental ordinance update, we can jump into harvest plan discussion. I'd like to invite Tom to come up.
Please. Thank you.
This is Tom Strock. He's one of our environmental service specialists who's does the forestry work for the county. And today, he's going to walk through our 2024 harvest plan.
Yes, good morning, Madam Chair and Commissioners. So this is something that we bring before you guys every year. We talk about our harvest plan, and just to notify you guys of what we're doing, I'm trying to tell you where we're doing it, and inform the public as well about what we have going on for 2024. So this information is derived from our 2015 Forest Management Plan. Yes, this handout you have right here, you should have one in front of you. Yep. So in our Forest Management Plan, what we did back in 2015 is we completed a model of our 105,000 acres of our forest land, and when we did that model, we figured out how much of each cover type that we have, of each forest we can harvest sustainably over the next 50 to 100 years. One of our goals is to provide a consistent amount of wood to our loggers, so that way we're not over harvesting, we're not under harvesting, and we stay consistent. So in that forest management plan, it tells us every 10 years about what our goals are. So every year we try to harvest anywhere from 1,300 to 1,400 acres. And it does vary a little bit because while we have these goals, we're not always able to match them up perfectly. So we're oftentimes dealing with 40, 50 acre parcels. So in the areas that we go over the previous year, we'll account for it the next year. The areas where we're under, we'll account for it the next year. So our numbers do fluctuate a little bit, but they're relatively pretty close. So you can see what's in front of you here. And then you also in your packet have a map of where our proposed areas are. So these, this map, yeah, so these are just our proposed areas. So when we go out and develop this, we take our management plan and we develop a 5-year candidate stand list that tells us over the next 5 years we want to look at X, Y, and Z. So this is just a 1-year screenshot of 2024. And sometimes your inventory isn't perfect, so when we go out and we look at something, we make sure it fits in with our forest management plan, and what we think is there is actually there. So these do fluctuate just a tad from time to time, but we always meet our goal. You know, and like I said, for 2024, it's going to be about 1,300 acres, 1,338. So we use the information in our forest management plan to come up with where we want to harvest based on our inventory and what's out there, and then we come to you and kind of tell you what we're doing and solicit any feedback you might have, and so then after we answer questions today, we'll come back before county board and we'll set a public hearing so that way the public can come and get educated on what we're doing and help us navigate our timber harvest. So anything to add or any questions?
No questions, but I was just looking at the map, looking at this map, and I thought, wow, there's going to be a lot harvesting down in my area, and then I realized I had it upside down.
Yeah, that is
I noticed that right away, and I was thinking, you don't have that many trees down there.
That is one thing we like to do is we try to spread our timber harvests out throughout the county. We don't want to harvest in one particular township, you know, too heavy at one time. You know, because some of these monies do go back to the townships and schools, and so we want to make sure that everybody, you know, we spread out what we're doing, so we're not concentrating just in one area. That's another good thing about our 5-year candidate stand plan list is we can really separate those out and try to be creative and not flood one area too much. So.
Tom, still a strong demand for aspen?
Yes, yep. Yeah, you know, markets always ebb and flow with, you know, like this summer with it being so dry, loggers are able to get into a lot more places, so the mills are a lot fuller than they usually are going into winter. But there's always a strong demand, and, you know, we've heard about different struggles with the economy, and you know, there's some mills that have had some temporary shutdowns, and so, you know, logging is always it turns over very fast. So week to week, month to month, we don't really know what it can bring, but one thing we wanted to do is stay consistent for the people that we work with, the loggers that we work with, so they have consistent stumpages, because we could go out and in a year where aspen is through the roof and set up everything we have and make a ton of money one year and then have nothing for 5 years. But we have not done that. We wanted to stay consistent and keep that sustainable flow to the market.
So based on previous harvest, what kind of dollars does 1,338 acres bring into the county?
What are we doing? We're doing about $1 million or $1.2 million-ish.
I'd say 1.2.
Yeah, and it's hard because sometimes, you know, our summer wood will bring us more money than winter wood, just because it's more valuable. It's easier to get into. They can harvest it during summer. So depending on what's out here and what we find, it does ebb and flow just a little bit. So it's always variable.
Well, and I think the part that we struggle with sometimes that we just don't, I mean, we had some cold winters, but we haven't had good frost lately, so getting to some of that winter wood has been tough. It's because we have to cross a lot of those wetlands to get back to the spot, and you know, we got that early snow last year, and it just really kind of tanked the season for a lot of winter wood because it was hard to get that to freeze down then after that. So I think that's the part that makes things kind of ebb and flow a little bit, is just, you know, if we have a wet summer, it's hard to get into the summer wood, and if we have a warm winter, it's hard to get to that, you know, to that winter wood where it's more remote and frozen. So I think that's the more fluid part of the logging process.
Madam Chair, I got a couple of questions. One is on oak thinning. So you actually go in and thin the oak, stands of oak in order to make the other oaks grow better? Is that what that is?
Yeah, so when we enter an oak thinning for the first time, we're generally removing those short-lived species.
Yep.
Those that, if we were just to let the oak stand go till it reaches maturity, they would naturally die out, senesce out. And so we're going in and capturing that volume, that timber, while also, increasing
Leaving
that oak's
the-
ability
yep.
to grow and continue and thrive, so.
And the logger pays for that as a stumpage on, knowing they're going into thin?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep.
The other thing is there any factor, I know it'd be really hard to do, but with the storms we've had over the few years, or like this last winter where we had a lot of ice damage on, do we ever estimate what our loss of marketable timber is because of nature?
So we've never estimated that, no, but one thing that we've always done is we've stayed consistent with our management. And so we don't have these old aspen stands that we used to have even 10 years ago. So we don't see a ton of storm damage from, on our lands because we're out actively managing, making sure that we have a healthy, diverse forest. Not to say that we don't have certain areas that might get damaged, but the nice thing about the aerial photos that we have and the work that we do is when we find those areas, we manage them quickly, get the trees cleaned up, get the forestry growing. So, we don't struggle with that as much as some other, either agencies or private people is because we have that diverse, that diverse forest and an actively young growing forest. So
Now, when
it's good
the
for us.
DNR also has properties within our jurisdiction, and they also manage those, correct? And are any of those managed next to ours?
Yes, yep. Yeah, we've got, yeah, yep.
Where somebody will buy DNR stumpage and buy crowing stumpage and go in there and do the whole thing?
Yeah, we've worked with the DNR office to get their candidate stand list. So they have a 15-year, so we have that, so we can be creative on some of these areas that are really challenging to get into. We'll work with the DNR and say, hey, you've got a harvest here, let's partner, get a larger volume, a larger area, so that way it makes it more interest to the logger. Yep.
So next steps then will be, yeah, oh, I'm
I
sorry.
guess just a comment from me. I don't necessarily dish out as many thank yous as Steve Barrows does, but I try to. But Tom, I just want to draw you out and just say I've heard lots of good things about the good work that you're doing, and I meant to say thank you and for the good job you're doing out at the landfill. But I don't know, I think I walked off and was doing something else, but just want to publicly say thanks because I've heard you're doing really a good job.
Thank you. Thanks for the
From
opportunity.
the Land Services Director himself, so.
Good to know. Good. Thank you.
Any questions about that? Do we still have time to talk about this easement real fast?
Go ahead. Thanks, Tom.
Courtney, could you put that up on the? Could you put that up on the screen quick? Is that possible? I think I emailed it to you earlier, but if not, you can just have this one to put up on the screen.
That isn't in our packet?
It isn't.
No,
No,
okay.
this is a late edition, so.
Sorry,
Hot off
Gary.
the press.
Excuse me?
Hot off the press.
Hot off the press. So we were approached last week by Mike Czar to, he needs
is
to
it not
get
up here?
access to these parcels up here. He's working with the Soil and Water Conservation District at the moment to place these into a conservation easement as part of the One Watershed, One Plan program. And to do that, there has to be legal access to get here. And so we've done the research and found that he has an easement through here, all the way up over to here, and then he can get access to where he needs to, because this is his property here. What he's looking for from us is a 33-foot by 33-foot easement, so that he can just come onto county land and then just get over to his. Very small easement. All the other easements are in place. This is the last piece he needs to connect to get up to his property, and then that would allow him to participate in that easement program. So, from a staff, yeah, this is Tom, why don't you explain? You can give better. This
Yeah.
is north of one.
Yeah, sure. So this is, the actual easement here is in Little Pine Township. It's off the map, but you can see the lake there. Just below that would be County Road 1, east of Emily. And then this would be like the Duck Lake Wildlife Management Area just to the south there. So everything that is in that light tan is tax forfeited property, and everything not shaded is private lands or DNR lands. Yep.
So we're talking just a little corner?
He just needs to basically come up on ours and sneak back across to get over to his. 33 by 33 is all he needs.
I don't see any problem with that.
There's, from a land management perspective, it won't have any impact on how we manage that property into the future. We won't see any issues with that whatsoever, and it's a pretty minor easement request.
Is that put up for a public hearing or anything like that? Because there's no other adjoining,
The process is that we come talk to the county board, make sure if you guys are, would support it or not, and then they go back to their surveyor and they draft up the legal description and all the paperwork, and then the easement will actually come back to the board at a county board date for you to take action on the easement itself. But we found that we didn't want them to spend a lot of money on a survey and the legal and tell them to come back to here and you guys say, no, we don't think it's a good idea. Well, we thought it'd be a better idea to start here first, make sure that there was support at the county board level, and then they could then go through the process of getting the legal work drawn up for it.
I don't see any problem.
Okay,
Thank you.
appreciate your time today. Thanks for it.
Thank you very much. Jory,
I don't think we heard you, Madam Chair.
Jory, you're next.
Jory.
be nice. You're trying to talk nicer, be nicer.
Okay, sorry,
He
thank
tries
you.
to be nicer to everybody but me.
I noticed that. I'm there for you, Rosemary. That's why I'm here, to protect you.
Good, keep between us.
Just reach out across.
You'll be sitting here next year.
I may not. Go ahead.
Good morning.
Sorry.
Good morning.
Good morning.
So Joe Luxick and I are here to discuss the possibility of contracting out the Laurel Street campus here snow plowing. Since the beginning of time, or at least as far back as we know, the highway department has always handled the snow plowing of these lots, even after the highway department moved out by the airport. In 2013-ish, we looked at some efficiencies to be gained, and at that time, having our fleet staff come down here and do the snow plowing seemed to make the most sense and provide the best customer service for not only campus staff and visitors, but also to get our plow trucks out on the road sooner and concentrating on our roadways. Over the last couple of years, we've encountered some challenges, and we decided to look at what it would be pros and cons for having a contractor come in. So I started the process last year and could not get any bids. I reached out to 7 different contractors, and none had the capability to provide that service. Joe and Zach Spicer, former shop lead, kind of picked that up again this last summer and reached out, and we were able to get 3 bids from 3 different contractors in town. So then once we had that, Joe started some analysis and really started looking at where we could have a return on investment by having an outside vendor come in. And what he determined was about 300 hours of staff time is dedicated just to snow plowing our campus lots down here. And that's taking the fleet staff off the shop floor, coming down here. And the biggest challenge we see is it disrupts the schedule for the rest of the day. So if they've got sheriff's squad cars, if we've got snow plows that are down for any reason, those are delayed or even deferred to a later date for service. And it's becoming more and more disruptive. So when we compared them, contractor A, B, and C, compared to what our current staffing is and what we would provide, we found out that the costs were pretty close to being neutral as far as contractor-wise. And you can see in this spreadsheet here that it takes about 2.8 hours on average per event. And then we have about 36 events on average looking at the last 5 years. Last year was considerably more, but on a 5-year trend, that's where we compare at. And contractor A is a little bit higher, but they're also using much bigger equipment and have operators that are skilled in that equipment, where we think we can produce about a 35% savings on time and efficiency. So we think that they'll be able to do the lots in 2 hours. roughly, and then that cost actually breaks down to that 56,880. So it would be a small savings to the county by going with contractor A. And on the next slide, you can see some of Joe's analysis on what it costs for our employees to be down here plowing versus using outside vendors when we have to contract that work that they're normally taking care of because they're now downtown. Here, snow plowing, roughly we took the 300 hours and the difference of what our shop rates cost compared to our outside vendors that we're using, and it's a savings of about $26,000 to bring that back in-house. Snow plowing to parking lots was roughly about a $2,000 savings based on the contractor and what we believe they can do for efficiencies. Overall, we believe we can save about $28,000 by having the outside vendor come in to do the snow plowing, and a lot of that cost comes back to having our own staff working on our equipment versus having to send them out. Also, by doing that, it creates a lot of disruption in our schedule, which really became apparent the last couple of years, especially with our sheriff's office staff and the squad cars that they take care of. So we would have them scheduled to be serviced, and a lot of our deputies are scheduling this when they're on shift or when they're not on shift, that it can be dropped off if it's something more major. Well, when we'd have to come down here snow plowing, we would have to change that whole schedule and end up deferring or sending them to another local source in town, which disrupt the sheriff's office schedule too. We have deputies now shifting along with us to try to get those for repairs or oil services. We also feel that our staff does an excellent job going bumper to bumper, inspecting, looking for safety issues, looking for wear items, and they're providing a much more complete service for our sheriff's office staff and other departments, community services and land services that are also customers of the fleet staff. The vendor that we are looking at working with is also Smart MPCA, Smart Salting Certified, which our drivers are also, and that just follows best practices laid out by the MPCA for applying salt usage, which was very important to us. We are a Smart Salting Certified county, meaning that we've taken the training and we are enacting the best practices to conserve salt and the impact it has on our environment. One other note is a transition we feel will be pretty seamless. The contractor that we are looking to work with has done work with us in the past. They have been doing our roadway spring sweeping and some other periodic sweeping over the last 5 years. Been very receptive and has a lot of other accounts in the area around Laurel Street here, so they will be in the area working. There are still the same requirements and expectations that our own fleet staff have that we have written into a contract as far as timelines and meeting those expectations of having the lots plowed and salted before 7 o'clock in the morning the business day starts. If the event ends, if it continues to snow throughout the day, they're committed to having somebody here opening up the parking lots to keep traffic flowing in and out.
So, question, Jory. So, if there's another huge snow year like last year, and the snow, big mountains of snow, our staff or the county highway department staff on if it happens to be a sunny day, we would haul away that snow rather than contracting with them, correct?
Correct, yes. Okay. We would still reserve the right to plow or haul snow how we see fit, and it's written in the contract. Our intent is that we would still handle that the contractor would be here to open up the lots and do the plowing and the salting on business days or on weekends to keep the Sally Ports and the sheriff's staff so they can get in and out of the parking lots. But we would do a majority. Our intent is to do the hauling. If for some reason we have another winter like last year and we just don't get a break, we reserve the right that we can contract with them and they'll provide an hourly price to do that. Last year it worked. I think we hauled snow out of here twice last year. Mm-hmm. That was the most we've ever had to haul out of here. Usually we have to do it once a year, but last year we just ran out of room about January. Mm-hmm. So we had our own maintenance staff take care of that.
What about this on the sheet there? Can you pull up that page? the 300 hours at $87.21 an hour, where are you coming up with that? What's that all about?
That, Commissioner Coring, that is, that's the difference between the hourly shop average outside of here, the repair shops out here. That's their cost is $135 average in labor expense, and ours is roughly the $47.79 for labor cost for our guys in the shop. So that difference there is those two, the difference between those two.
So what you're trying to, if I'm following this, is what you're saying is if our which we're hiring these guys to be mechanics, I should say people, could be a lady mechanic, right, Renee? But if we're hiring these people to be mechanics and then they're over here snow plowing and they're not getting our squad cars or whatever else, and then they need an oil change and they're going to Mills Ford or going somewhere else, is that's what you're trying to, the
Yes.
point you're trying to make?
Yes, that's the difference we're trying to show is that cost.
I understand.
Madam Chair, so, Joe, how many times do we go outside the shop to do our own repairs? You know, you're saying if we were out snow plowing, we'd be sending that work out. When we're snow plowing or doing these 300 events or whatever you've got, or 36 events, is the work actually going out and getting done? So we're really not spending that money. Are we actually taking cars out and say, well, we're snow plowing today, these squads have to go to Mills or have to go here and have to get work done today? Are we doing that?
Majority of those reschedules, because we typically don't get to them if we push them out a week or two, because we're still going to be snow plowing in the next week or two or whatever. We usually send those out to an outside vendor to have those repairs done, because we just ain't going to get to them in that time.
So there is we're already losing some, but I would think it wouldn't be all those hours, that you're able to sit there and say, well, I'll be back this afternoon after I'm done cleaning up that lot and I'll finish up on that car.
It's not all of them, but it's a majority of them.
Okay.
Yes.
And if you look at the bills, you can see where they.
Yeah, well, but I don't know exactly if that was a repair that had to be done at an outside shop because we didn't able to do it or something like that, or versus being done because we didn't have time.
We do have repairs, don't get me wrong with that, we do have to send out because we physically can't handle them in the shop. They have to be done by the dealership.
Yep.
And those we send out no matter what. But the stuff that we should be able to handle, we're sending a lot of that out during these 300 hours of snowplow time. Yeah, there's quite a bit there, yes.
Yeah, and I guess I would say that I'll be supportive of this, you know, obviously on a trial basis. We'll try it for this year. It kind of reminds me of back when the county staff used to plow all the unorganized territory, and we decided that we were going to go to a contractor to do that. And I think there was a little bumpy road at the start, but I think it's really turned out to be really good. I mean, wasn't there was a huge snow event, and the road was not getting plowed. Do you remember that?
Oh, yeah, I remember more than one.
Okay, but I think it's actually worked out good now. I mean, I think it's, all the bugs are ironed out, and so, but we can do this year, and then if we see that it's not working, we can always go back to something else, right?
Yeah, and what we have proposed is a 3-year contract to make it worth the contractor's while, but we do have a clause in there that we can end it at any time. The contractor can also end it at any time. That leaves us a little bit vulnerable, but we're thinking that it's going to work out. They've been commercially snow plowing in the lakes area for quite a few years, and they've got a pretty good track record for service.
So when there's contracting, is it contracting by event or contracting for the season?
By event. So when we call them, it's basically an hourly price that they're giving us. So if we have a lean winter, we're going to pay less. If we have another winter like last year, we're probably going to pay more than this estimated cost because we based it on our average of 36 events.
Anyone else? Well, thank you.
Did you get a consensus of?
Yeah, so
I
if,
think we want it.
Huh?
I think we want it.
Okay,
Yeah,
sounds good.
I mean, try it. I mean, you tried it out there. I talked to somebody in Cinesam and I asked them about how's that being taken care of, because I know that's contracted, and they said, I stopped the guy in the truck and thanked him because it's so much better than, he's lived out there for 50 years out in Cinesam. So he's very appreciative.
Yeah, and it is a different contractor than that, but it's modeled the same, and we expect the same results. And we'll continue to monitor this as we do the first assessment and work with the contractor if anything comes up. Our intent then is to put this on the consent agenda for the next board meeting, if you're all okay with that. So,
Yeah.
okay.
Thank you very
What,
much.
can I ask one more question? What about back here? Where do you pile up the snow back here?
That all goes over the hill.
On Brainerd's property.
We're giving it away. We'll give that
Don't
snow
quote me
away.
on that.
In the it'll be in the
Renee's
paper.
got it, quoted you. Thank you, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Commissioner.
Thanks, guys.
Yep.
Okay, that looks like it's,
That's it? Therese, anything from you? Time for your evaluation?
We can ask Courtney too. Courtney, do you have anything to add?